To unlatch the top in the front, we pull out this little trim plug behind the dome light. It really pulls out easily, and we use the 6mm Allen wrench that we turn clockwise a quarter turn to manually unlock the front latches. Now in order to push the top back, we have opened the pressure relief valve on the pump, and of course we have already pulled back the trunk lid. And the smartest way to get this top to pull back is to push up the way I'm doing now. That is the natural movement for this frame. It will make the top lift off, and we keep lifting up the top. Now, next step, I'll show you how to secure the top so that we can take the trim panel out. The headliner is held in place with 3 chromed screws in the front and 2 plastic pieces on the side. The plastic trim pieces each have 3 bolts in them, Phillips bolts. First one over here, second one over here, third one all the way in the back. All you need is a fairly small Phillips screwdriver, at least 2.5 inches long, better 3. So we take out the trim piece on the side here. I have already taken the middle and rear bolt out to speed up this video. It's helpful to have a magnetic tray to put all these bolts into, or you just put them in your pocket. And this trim piece comes loose. Now this trim piece is held in place in the rear with a flat piece of it. This piece of the trim piece is in a tab, so you actually want to pull down on it. Theoretically you can leave this hanging here, but we just want to avoid it breaking later on, so we'll take it out all the way. We'll move it around here. Then we remove the 3 front screws on the headliner. 1, 2, and I'll come around to remove the 3rd one. At that point we may be able to pull the trim piece, the headliner, already without the 2nd side trim piece taken out. Let's see how that works out. We're experimenting on the go here. You can work this trim piece out already if you want to, or you can remove this 2nd trim piece already first. It would be smarter, if you want to remove only one of these plastic trim pieces, to remove the right one first, because that's where the hoses for the top lock cylinder are routed anyway. There are several positions that the top could be in order to take out the front lock cylinder. We don't want to confuse you with all different kinds of positions. Earlier we just had the top up in a higher position. We've closed it again just because I personally don't like to work that far overhead, and I can just do this while sitting. So we've closed the front without latching it. Now we take a T25 Torx wrench and unscrew the latch that the front lock cylinder is in. Don't worry about the bolts falling out, they are secured to the latch. Now you can see actually the latch is partially locked. That is actually the clincher. If you use your 6mm Allen wrench and move the latch around until this shaft is partially retracted, then you see the mounting pin with a circlip for the front clevers of this front lock cylinder. And we did have to remove the latch assembly, because in order to get this and this mounting pin out, there needs to be a little bit of distance between the latch and the roof panel. So first I'll show you how to easily take these circlips out. You take a small flat screwdriver, push it into the gap of this circlip and just walk it out of there. I'm putting the circlip in a magnetic tray so it doesn't get lost. We do the same thing on this side, just easy does it, move it slowly, controlled movement gets this clip removed. Next we can push these two pins out. I'll do the rear pin first, just pull the latch assembly back a little bit and push out the mounting pin. There we go. That's the rear mounting pin. If we want to do something good, we can already kind of loosen this cylinder. There's a friction fit here where you see the dent in the housing that pushes down on the cylinder housing and kind of keeps the cylinder in the housing in a friction fit. I've pushed the cylinder back a little bit preventatively because I know what's going to be next. But first let's take out the front pin as well. My personal opinion is that after I have pulled the front clevis off, I will join these two parts of the latch assembly back together and put the pin back through there, but it's a little bit awkward having the camera in the way, so I won't do it this time around, and I will just pull the old cylinder out that I had freed the friction fit on earlier. Pull the old cylinder out. So the old cylinder is out. The big advantage of doing core exchange where you get your new parts from Top Hydraulics first is we can at this point already put in freshly rebuilt cylinder from Top Hydraulics, better than new because we have all these great, much better seals in there. And now I will first line up the front clevis. I'll stick a screwdriver through here just to make sure I don't lose my alignment. It's a little bit awkward doing this while sharing the space with the camera. The camera really gets in the way. I apologize for complaining, but that needed to be said. So now I'll get the mounting pin through the clevis. Oops. If only I could lift up the left elbow, but that's where the camera is. So I'll just hold you all up a little bit by fiddling around with this pin. Wiggle things around until everything lines up, and in a moment we'll have the pin coming through here. There we go. We could secure the circlip already. Let me show you how that's done. Well, it's pretty simple. You just push it up there and in one controlled motion push it in the groove. There we go. Now the rear part of the cylinder again needs to get past this friction fit, and we'll just lever things around a little bit. Here we go. Use the screwdriver to line the holes up to each other. Get the rear mounting pin through here. Secure the circlip. And that part of the new cylinder is in place. So next step is to screw the lock back into place with the 3 Torx bolt. Then we cut a zip tie over here, route the hoses the way the old hoses were, and this all is not as difficult as it looks with me huffing and puffing next to the camera, just because we're sharing the same space. We can simply pull the hoses out of these clips. Once the new hoses are in place, we just go bit by bit replacing the new hoses where the old ones were. Keep pulling out over here, put the new hoses in, keep working our way to the back. Once we are here, we will actually have to raise the top, and we'll pick up from there, show you a little bit more trim removal and hose routing. So one more point is that this front lock needs to be aligned properly. You can see how there's some play in the mounting holes, and that's there on purpose from the manufacturer because they align it as they install it in the car. It's actually pretty easy to do. Two ways to go about it. One is, of course, you can try to match up the paint dots that were originally on here in the first place, but they have to match perfectly on all three bolts, and if you're off a little bit on one, that can translate into a weird shift in the whole lock mechanism. So the easier way to do this right is if you first leave the bolts loose as they are now, and you make sure that the latch at least is aligned such that the two claws from the front locks go properly into the windshield header. You close the latch, you close the top, and I'll get my light back up here. Here we go. And now the next step is to manually latch the front while these bolts are loose, and this tends to align the latch exactly the way it should be. Let's tighten up these bolts, and I'll show you how you can tell that this front lock is aligned properly. When you lock the front, you will notice that both front lock micro switches get triggered by the latched front. So as the front locks, I'm locking, this part of the mechanism triggers a micro switch, and it does the same thing on the other side. We want to make sure that both micro switches are triggered as locked when this lock is latched in the front, so that both micro switches give the signal to the computer the front is latched, all is safe, you can continue closing the rear, meaning the trunk section. You can double check by slowly opening and turning the mechanism such that it just starts triggering one switch, and then compared to the other side, if it has just about started triggering or touching the switch on that side, then you know you're in good shape. Let's just latch it all the way, and we see that both micro switches are triggered. They're not clicking anymore when you push on the little lever here. So both of them have been depressed, and that means the front is latched properly and aligned. The trim panel on the right side of the rear window is the last piece of panel removal for this front lock cylinder. We pull the weather stripping aside and pull out the front corners. The rear corners need some tapping towards the left rear of the car, and I'll explain why. The front tabs here simply get pulled out forward. The rear tabs are at an angle where when you push this thing out, you really want to bump it with your wrist and loosen up these tabs. Worst case, if you were to break anything, you can always glue it back together. I actually haven't seen one of these trim pieces breaking, but don't be too afraid. Whatever happens here is fixable. Routing of the hoses is going through a bunch of metal clips that are simply pulled off the top panels themselves, and you can pull the wires and the hoses out of these clips. There, let me count down the clips for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then down on the bottom here is an 8mm hex screw that you have to unscrew for this particular retaining clip. And we have a total of, I think, a little short of a dozen zip ties that you cut and replace as you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and a few more down around the corner. So next, these hoses are going to zigzag. They'll go close to the main lift cylinder and then back to the pump, and we'll show you more of that perspective from inside the trunk. So I want to show you something neat about the trunk lid mechanism. We have it tipped back right now. What may look scary to you at first, but it can be useful, is that even in this position you can open your trunk lid the regular way and tilt it up. So things aren't super stable. This will not stay up by itself, but you can actually support this mechanism if you ever want to create access, better access in the front corners. You actually don't need this for the cylinder removal, but it's a neat thing to show you. You could put a support that's about 6 feet long right under this corner. I got one ready here. You could use a 2x4, or we have a cardboard mailing tube here. So this can actually keep your trunk lid up higher if you ever need better access to the front corners of the trunk. So the front lock hoses come down on the inside of this rear window panel, and they make a turn right about here, of course behind the metal. And now if we bring the camera around, I'll show you the tricky spot. At first the hoses make their turn over here at the tip of my finger, and then the tricky part is they are routed forward again, and this is the one clip that is often not found that easily. It has a T20 Torx bolt in it. If you have short angled T20 wrench, that's somewhat easy to get in there. Otherwise you'll have to improvise. You could also just put pliers on this bolt and first mark it, because what we want you to do is make exactly one turn counterclockwise. That's how far you loosen this clamp in order to be able to pull out the old hoses and then stick in the new ones once you're ready for them. And this will keep the clamp in the proper position without sliding around a lot for you. Also, while you're taking out the old hoses, you're going to undo this zip tie and put it in the same place again on the new hoses. So now imagine we have the new hoses in already. We just tighten up this clamp one turn clockwise, and all is well in this department. The hose routing from here to the pump is trivial. It just goes through a few clips and you're there. Now let's talk about removing and replacing the hoses on the pump. We're looking at a model year 2000 or younger system here, where the hydraulic hoses are routed up and then going straight down into the pump, meaning they have straight fittings, whereas an earlier model year 98 or 99 would have angled fittings on the hoses, unless those cylinders have been replaced before. And the angled hoses would simply be routed something like this. They simply don't go up as high, which means the hoses with the straight fittings are a little bit longer to accommodate the need for extra length for going up and then down again. Now these hoses are completely interchangeable. It's just that Mercedes figured out they could save a few cents by making the hose a little bit longer and giving it a straight fitting as opposed to the slightly more expensive angled fitting. Again, absolutely interchangeable. If you were to buy a new cylinder from Mercedes, it would always have new straight fittings on it. So how to take these hoses off is really quite easy. It's been engineered very well. We have this blue security retaining plate here that we can lever up a little bit to take it off. You want to grab a good hold of it and not drop it in the back here where it is very hard to retrieve. If you were to drop this plate all the way in the back, I would not go through the trouble of retrieving it because these retaining plates are very well engineered. They click into place. It's not like if they're not secured they'll wobble around. No, they have two places in which they can stay secured. That is the shut position that secures all the hoses, or if you rotate this plate some, what is this, maybe 8 degrees counterclockwise, it clicks into the open position. In the open position you can now pull out the hose, just as easy as that. And here we go, we have hose number 31, which is one of the front lock cylinder hoses. The number 31 is printed about a 3/4 inch from the steel fitting always on these hoses. It could be printed in red or white ink. And just so that if you have pulled all hoses and you want to figure out where they all go back to and you haven't done this piece by piece, you're safe, because the hose number 31 is also engraved on this plate. So maybe the video will show it here. For example, there's a number 23 with an arrow engraved, which means this port here is for hose number 23. So again, number 31 I have pulled out, and I will put in the replacement hose number 31. I come through here, push it in, turn my plate, and it's secured. We do the same thing for hose number 33. Turn the plate, wiggle it a little bit, and here we can pull the hose out and now we push in the hose number 33 here and secure it after it's been pushed in all the way. We turn the plate and all will be good. There we go, securely in place. Now, one thing, these bolts, you do not want to turn these bolts unless you absolutely have to. If you remove these Allen bolts here, when you torque them back down and you torque them too hard, you will end up stripping the threads in this aluminum pump block, and you have a mess at your hands. So the plates really can be turned unless they're badly corroded. They can be turned easily by hand. Worst case, you could lever a screwdriver in here to break it loose, or you could carefully tap with a hammer and a drift pin or something like that.